All right, good morning, everyone. It's an incredible schus to be here with you again this week. And I know that, of course, our primary preoccupation is the learning of Sefer Tehillim. But being that we find ourselves just 2 days before Lag BaOmer, I felt it behooves us to utilize this hour or whatever amount of time we have together this morning to be able to focus a little bit on the sanctity and the sacredness of this incredibly unique day. Lag BaOmer is a multifaceted day with many layers of meaning kind of superimposed on top of it. Understand that before let's say about, we'll call it, 2,000 years ago. So Lag BaOmer was no different than Lab BaOmer, no different than Lad BaOmer. The significance of the 33rd day of the Omer really comes about towards the end of the Second Temple era. Up until that point in time, Lag BaOmer was just, I don't want to say just another day in the Omer, because remember, part of the entire essence of Sfiras HaOmer is making sure to infuse meaning and profundity into everyday life. But there was no greater significance to the 33rd day of the Omer other than any other day. But of course, you know that for us, Lag BaOmer is an incredibly unique day. And in fact, if you take a look at number 1 on your sheet, so the Shulchan Aruch says as follows. Shulchan Aruch says, Noagim shol lehistaper ad Lag BaOmer. Our custom, our contemporary custom today, is that we do not take haircuts. Literally, the staff means to take a haircut ad Lag BaOmer until the 33rd day of the Omer. Sha'amrim az pasku milamos, because it is then that we say that the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. We'll discuss that more in just a moment. And then the Shulchan Aruch goes on with some other details. But if you skip down to number 1, you'll see that I underlined a line for you. A strange, enigmatic statement in the Ramah. The Ramah, remember, Rav Moshe Isserlis, is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch written by Rav Yosef Karo, who was a Sephardic posek, and the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, an Ashkenazic posek, adds his notes into the Shulchan Aruch whenever Ashkenazic tradition differs from Sephardic tradition. So the Ramah says, and what happens on Lag BaOmer? Not only do we take haircuts, but marbim bo kitzas simcha. We go ahead and we increase our simcha a little bit. Marbim bo kitzas simcha. We amplify our joy a bit on this day. And if you think about this, it is such an incredibly strange way to phrase the day. What do you mean, marbim bo kitzas simcha? Either marbim bo simcha, either we go ahead and we increase the happiness and joy of the day, or just leave it alone. Just don't say anything. But what does it mean, marbim bo kitzas simcha? That we go ahead and we increase a little bit of simcha. So to appreciate what's happening over here, I put a lot more on this sheet than what we're going to really focus on today. I'm really just going to draw your attention to a couple of the first few sources, and we'll build out from there. We have to look at the Gemara Meseches Yevamis in number 2. And this Gemara is a very well-known Gemara, for this is the story of the tragic episode with the students of Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara begins with a very interesting introduction. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva says, Lama Torah bialduso, if a person learned Torah when he was young, Yomot Torah biziknuso, person should continue to learn Torah when he is old. Hayulo talmidim bialduso, if a person had students when he was young, Yihiulo talmidim biziknuso, he should make sure to establish students when he's old. And it is here that the Gemara quote, Rabbi Akiva quotes the pasuk from Koheles, Baboker zera ez zarecha, v'la erev al tanach yadecha. Literally translated, in the morning sow your seed, and in the evening do not withhold your hand. Okay, so that's Rabbi Akiva's statement. Even if you learn Torah when you're young, learn Torah when you're old. Even if you have students when you're young, create students when you're old. Quoting the pasuk from Koheles, sow your seed in the morning and don't stop sowing your seeds in the evening as well. Okay, interesting idea. The Gemara then launches into a story. The story goes as follows. The Gemara says, Amru shnei masar elef zugim tamidim hayul Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students. Migavas adan Tipras, from one end of Eretz Yisrael all the way to the other end of Eretz Yisrael. V'kulan meisu beperek echad, they all died at the same time. Mipnei shelo nahagu kavod zelazeh, because they did not exhibit proper honor one to the other. So this topic of shalom nagu kavod zelazeh in and of itself is a fascinating thing. What does that mean? They disrespected each other. They weren't nice to each other. Remember, we're familiar with terms like this. For example, when the Gemara Maseches Yuma discusses why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Gemara says the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam. Now, sinas chinam, baseless hatred, a very profound statement. Hatred, animosity. This is very interesting. Lo nagu kavod zelazeh. They didn't act, literally means they didn't act with respect, proper respect one to the other. Which sounds like they didn't hate each other. They weren't necessarily nasty to each other. They did not go ahead and pull the rug out from one another, backstab one another. They just didn't act in a way that was befitting their station, their standing, and their position in life. Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, are held to a higher level. Every Jew is an ambassador of the Ribono Shel Olam, but the Talmid Chacham, the Torah scholar, the person who immerses himself in the Ribono Shel Olam's Torah, is a senior ambassador. That person represents God even in a more profound way, and as such, that individual has an obligation to go ahead and ensure that he gives off the right image. See, even something that might be a more slight infraction for a regular person, when it comes to Talmid Chacham, it's so much more severe. They did not give proper honor one to the other, so they all died. Now, we know this story, but sometimes stories that you know for a long time, especially things that you know even from your childhood, you tend to become desensitized to them. So understand what this means, that 24,000 students died. Just the sheer calamity, the sheer trauma to the Torah community, to Am Yisrael. And these were not kids, these weren't children, these were adult men. I'm sure many of them married, many of them children, many of them having children. So 24,000 students die. What about all of the widows? And what about all of the orphans? An incredibly overwhelming trauma for Klal Yisrael. What happens? V'haya olam shamim. The Gemara says the world was desolate. Another very profound statement. What do you mean the world was desolate? Remember, with the death of Rabbi Akiva's students, the Torah world was essentially wiped out. Essentially, it's wiped out. The future leadership of Am Yisrael is wiped out. Rabbi Akiva was the Gadol Hadar. His 24,000 students were the creme de la creme of Am Yisrael, of Talmidei Chachamim, the future manhigim, the future leaders. And now when they all die, all 24,000, the world Kiviyachol was desolate. It was empty. The world was devoid. It was a huge hole, a gaping hole in the world. Till Rabbi Akiva came to the rabbis who lived in the south of Eretz Yisrael, V'shana lahem, and he began to teach these new 5 students Torah. Who were these 5? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua. These are the 5 new students of Rabbi Akiva. Vehem he'emidu Torah osasha. And these 5 students, they picked up the reins. They picked up the responsibility. They realized that 24,000 of the best and brightest and holiest were no longer with us. They redoubled their efforts and they took it upon themselves to rebuild the world of Torah. And the Gemara says, Tana, kula mesu mipesach v'adatzeres. See, it's interesting because the Gemara says that all the students of Rabbi Akiva died beperek echad, during one time. But the Gemara doesn't tell us when that time was. So then the Gemara ends off by saying, by the way, they died between Pesach and Shavuos. 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died between Pesach and Shavuos. Okay, so comes along the Meiri in number 4. The Meiri is one of the early commentaries on the Talmud, and the Meiri writes, Kabbalah biyad hageonim zal shebiyom lag BaOmer paska hamisa. And the Meiri says we have a Kabbalah, we have a tradition that when then the students stopped dying, they stopped dying on lag BaOmer. That's when they stopped dying. Right, the last levaya was on Lag BaOmer, or maybe on Lab BaOmer, maybe on Leiv BaOmer, but they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer. It was the end of the plague. Now you have to understand something. Why was it the end of the plague? Because they all died. In other words, it's not the pshat that Lag BaOmer came around, the Baruch Hashem, the Magefa, the plague stopped and everything was okay. It stopped on Lag BaOmer because 24,000 died. There was no one left. There was no one left. So therefore, the Meiri says on Lag BaOmer they stopped dying. And now, if we kind of link this back to the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch says therefore on Lag BaOmer, well, first of all, on a basic behavioral level, we observe mourning practices from the beginning of Sfira up until Lag BaOmer, again, because to mark the period of time that Rabbi Akiva's students died. Now, of course, it goes without saying that there is a dispute as to when exactly Rabbi Akiva's students died. Did they die, starting Rosh Chodesh, up until Lag BaOmer, or maybe past Lag BaOmer, maybe Rosh Chodesh to Rosh Chodesh? So there's a whole number of different customs in terms of observing mourning practices, but let's just focus on the most basic one, the one probably which we are most familiar with, which is from the beginning, from the second day of Sira, or really again it's still Pesach, but we'll call it from after Pesach until Lag BaOmer. This is the period when Rabbi Akiva's students died, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch says, comes Lag BaOmer, excuse me, comes Lag BaOmer, Marbim bo kitsas simcha. We increase our joy a little bit, or we increase in a little bit of joy, however you like. There's a small amplification of joy on this day because the death of Rabbi Akiva's students stopped. The Magefa, the plague that claimed 24,000 lives, had come to an end, and it therefore again Marbim bo kitsas simcha. So if you look at number 5, I'll just take this out so you don't have to go back to the sheet. So the Pri Chadash asks a very simple question. The Pri Chadash is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. And the Pri Chadash says, this doesn't make any sense. He says, Yesh ledaktek, besimcha zu lama. Why are we celebrating on Lag BaOmer? Ve'im mishum shepasku milamos, ma bekach. We're going to celebrate now because the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying? That's the celebration, the absence of death, the cessation of death. That's why we're celebrating. Harelo nishar echad mehem v'kula mesu. Like we said before, do you know why they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer? Do you know why they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer? Because there was no one left. Because it's not the pshat that they stopped dying. They did tshuva. Only 20,000 died. 4,000 were left. All 24,000 died. So it's true, the Magefa, the plague, came to an end on Lag BaOmer. But why in the world would we be celebrating this, the absence of death? Why would we be celebrating the cessation of the plague, which claimed all of these lives? So it's a profound question. Think about this for just a moment. I was speaking about this with someone the other day. We were speaking about this concept, and we could give a very contemporary mashal. When the day comes when the pandemic is declared over, I don't know when that's going to happen. It feels like some people are going to be in a pandemic for the rest of their lives, and maybe others. Okay, but whenever the day comes that we declare the pandemic is over, is there going to be a parade? Is there going to be a big simcha? I don't think so, because at the end of the day, it's claimed over 1 million lives. And at the end of the day, even in Eretz Hashem, when it's over in one part of the world, you see what's going on in India now, Rahman al-Islam, horrific. So you don't really celebrate the conclusion of death or the conclusion of a plague. You could sigh a breath of relief, and you see, I understand when it comes to Lag BaOmer, I understand why the mourning practices are lifted. That part I understand. So I understand you want to tell me we engage in mourning practices, I won't take a haircut, I won't shave for the first 33 days of the Omer because Rabbi Akiva's students died. Then comes Lag BaOmer, they stopped dying. We could lift the mourning practices. That I could accept, says the Pri Chadash. But to say Marbin Bo Kitsas Simcha, that we're going to celebrate a little bit, it doesn't seem to make any real sense. Doesn't seem to make sense. So the Pri Chadash advances something absolutely amazing. And the Pri Chadash writes, excuse me, he says, I'm just going to read this to you outside. V'lachein, listen to these words. Efsher, sha'simcha hi ahatalmidim, shehosef Rabbi Akiva achrakach shalom mesu. The Pri Chadash suggests that the simcha, the celebration of Lag BaOmer, is not rooted or connected to the cessation of the death of Rabbi Akiva's students, but rather, the simcha, the joy of Lag BaOmer, is rooted in the fact that Rabbi Akiva found 5 new students. So what the Pri Chadash does is he kind of divides the two elements. There's 2 things that happen on Lag BaOmer. There is the lifting of mourning practices, That's one. And then there is Mar bin Bokitzas Simcha, a bit of a celebration. The lifting of the mourning practices is because the death of Rabbi Akiva's students ceased. Again, why did it cease? Because there was no one left. Because they all died out. But again, the death is over. The mourning practices are over. I want to tie this back a little bit to what we learned last week. Do you remember again in last week's shir we quoted that when David HaMelech in the aftermath of the episode of Bathsheba, so the Nasa Navi told him that one of the punishments that's going to happen is David HaMelech had an infant son with Bathsheba, and you remember again, so the Navi said that the baby is going to die. You remember again that story. David HaMelech, while the baby is ill, he's fasting, he's sackcloth, he's laying on the floor, crying, davening. And then what happens? And then the baby dies. Remember again, they were all afraid to tell him. He realized something was happening. He asked, Hayalad Mace, is the baby dead? They said yes. What did he do? Changed his clothing, took a shower, sat down, ate something, and everybody's puzzled. What's going on over here? Because they thought David HaMelech was going to fall apart. Remember again what David HaMelech said? When the baby was alive, I had the ability to potentially change the circumstances. Now the baby's dead. I can't remember. David HaMelech says those tragic words. I'll see him again, but I'm going to go to him. He's not coming back to me. The tragic and overwhelming words of David HaMelech. So you see this idea also when the Rabbi Akiva's students are kiviyachol dying during the first 33 days of the Omer. There's the mourning practices. But then once they stop dying because they all died out, comes the 33rd day of the Omer, the mourning practices are lifted. The Pri Chadash says the concept of Mar bin Bo Kitzas Simcha, the concept that we're going to celebrate, that has to, or a little bit of celebration, that has to do with the fact that Rabbi Akiva went and found 5 new students. So let's talk about this for a little bit, because I think herein lies the profundity of Lag BaOmer, and the profundity of Am Yisrael, and the profundity of the resilience of people. So you have to appreciate something. Rabbi Akiva was the Gadol Hadar. These 24,000 Talmidim were like his children, right? A real Rebbe, right? The children are, the Talmidim, the students are just like the Rebbe's children. So you have to understand that for 33 days, when 24,000 students are dying, what is Rabbi Akiva doing? What is he doing? What is he doing? He's going from funeral to funeral, from levaya to levaya. And then what happens when he finishes the funeral? He goes to this Shiva house and to that Shiva house. And he has to sit with this widow and that, and he has to go ahead and comfort these children, these orphans. This was Rabbi Akiva's life for 33 straight days. And by the way, it extended past 33 straight days, because I guarantee you, although the Gemara doesn't say it, Rabbi Akiva took care of these mishpachos. So for 33 days, he's running from levaya to levaya, broken heart to broken heart, shattered life to shattered life. This is what Rabbi Akiva is doing. Now think about this for just a moment. This wasn't Rabbi Akiva's first run-in with adversity. Rabbi Akiva had an exceptionally difficult life. Right? First of all, again, until the age of 40, he's an ignorant shepherd. Right? Then again, a young girl, Rachel, falls in love with him, marries him, sees the potential in him. But again, she's cut off from his family. So once again, she's cut off from her family, So once again, Rabbi Akiva's on his own. So he learns, but with incredible privation, Rabbi Akiva loses a child. Rabbi Akiva suffers. Rabbi Akiva has a really difficult life. Rabbi Akiva sees the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Akiva sees the fall of Beitar, right? The failure of the Bar Kochva rebellion. Rabbi Akiva sees 1.5 million Jews slaughtered in Yerushalayim, and then however many again slaughtered in Beitar in the aftermath of the fall of Beitar by the Romans. Rabbi Akiva sees tragedy after tragedy. So you would have thought that after 33 straight days of levayas, shiva homes, and sitting with the brokenhearted, what would Rabbi Akiva have done? What would he have done? I'm done. I love you, and I'm your man, and I'm committed, but I can't do this anymore. I just can't. Do we know what it means to lose 24,000 students? Halavai, we should never know. But that was Rabbi Akiva's life work. That was his. Those students were his life work. That's what a Rebbe has in this world, right? A Rebbe passes his Torah onto his Talmidim, onto his students, and that is his legacy. This was his entire life work. So when those students died, it wasn't just a tragic death of 24,000 of the best and brightest of Am Yisrael. It was the entire catastrophic demolition of all of Rabbi Akiva's dreams, aspirations, and his entire life work. Everything he worked for all of those decades, disappeared within 33 days. And it didn't just disappear. It disappeared and it left in its wake, right, an overwhelming sea of heartbreak, adversity, trauma, and pain, all of which Rabbi Akiva himself had to manage and had to deal with. So if you're Rabbi Akiva, if I was Rabbi Akiva, I would say, Ribbono Shel Olam, I'm done. Right? I don't know. I'm buying a place in Boca, and I'm done. Right? I can't do this anymore. Right? I've served you. I've served Klal Yisrael. I'm going to retire. You have to give the mantle to someone else. But amazingly enough, what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says, after it talks about the death of Rabbi Akiva's students, it says, V'haya ha'olam shamim, the world was desolate. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva Eitzel Rabbeinu Shebedarim. Excuse me. Until Rabbi Akiva came to the rabbis of the south. And the commentaries in the Gemara point out, when did Rabbi Akiva go to the rabbis in the south? When did he go? He went right after the last Levaya. Right after the last Levaya was over. Right after the last funeral, Rabbi Akiva goes to find new students. This was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the individual who at the end of the day never gave up. Do you know sometimes in life you work on something, I think we've all encountered this. You work on something, maybe you even work hard on something, and it's something good, and it's something meaningful, and then it just crumbles. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's an initiative, an endeavor, a dream that I had to bring to actualization or fruition, and then it comes crumbling down. And the truth is, it's incredibly disheartening, and it's incredibly overwhelming. But what do you do when you see your life come crumbling down around you? What do you see? What do you do when you see your dreams and aspirations implode right in front of your eyes? And there are two choices. There are two paths. A person could say, I'm done. I give up. Right? Wave the white flag. I surrender. I tried. I put in the best effort that I could. Genuinely, I put in the best effort that I could. It didn't work, as they say, it hasn't worked. So I just have to yield. I have to give up. I surrender. Or a person could say, this dream didn't work. This aspiration didn't work. All that I built came tumbling down. But as long as there is breath in my body, I will rebuild. And it's not easy to take that second path, because it's really hard to start again in life. And it's really hard to pick up the pieces. And it's really hard to maintain your optimism and your hope for a better future when life has come tumbling down all around you. It's really difficult. But that was the choice that Rabbi Akiva made. Rabbi Akiva decided, you understand, after they put the last shovel full of dirt in the kever, in the grave of Rabbi Akiva's final student, he dried his tears. He put the shovel down. He dusted off his clothing. And that next moment, he went to find new Talmidim. He went to find new students. And remember how this Gemara starts? How did the Gemara start? Remember again, the Gemara Maseches Yevamos did not begin with the story of the death of Rabbi Akiva's students. But the Gemara began with Rabbi Akiva quoting a pasuk from Shlomo HaMelech, a piece of Solomonic wisdom. And what does Shlomo HaMelech say? Baboker zara esarecha. Baboker, in the morning, sow your seed. You know what the morning is? You know what? Whenever you see morning, we saw this in Tehillim. Boker always represents, when the sun, how do you feel when the sun comes up? When you watch a sunrise? A sunrise is majestic. Do you know why a sunrise is majestic? Is it because you're wowed by the science of it? Do you know why people find sunrises majestic? Because at the end of the day, my neshama knows that with the rising of the sun, there is a brand new day of opportunity in front of me. That's what's exciting about a sunrise. I'm seeing the dawn of a new day, a day filled with so much promise and potential, a day filled with so many opportunities and so many. I think I'm just seeing something so pretty. Oh, so pretty, the sun is rising. And meanwhile, my neshama is bursting with excitement. A new day, a new day. Do you know what a Jew can do with a day? Do you know what you could accomplish in one day? Yeshkana olama b'sha achos. You could give meaning to your entire life in one day. You could acquire olam haba in one day. You could change the world in one day. So Shalom Aleichem says, Baboker, in the morning, in the dawn of your life, zera zarecha, sow your seeds, right? Do accomplish. And sowing your seeds, when you sow seeds, what happens? I'm sure you know from your extensive agricultural experience. What happens when you sow seeds? What happens after you put the seeds in the ground? And the answer is nothing, right? You wait. You wait, okay, because in life you have to be patient, and we often don't see instant results. But in the morning, in the dawn, in the beginning, it's exciting. I'm going to put a seed here and a seed there. I'm going to start this. I'm going to move this. I'm going to start on this initiative. I'm going to dream this dream. I'm going to put this and that. In the morning, do all of that. Vela erev al tanach yadecha. What's erev? What's erev? Erev is the evening. Erev is night. What's night? Night are times of adversity. Nights are times of adversity. You know what the nighttime is? The nighttime is when a major flood comes along and washes away all of the soil, including all of the seeds that you planted. That's nighttime. That's what happens at night. In the morning, I'm all excited. I planted all of the seeds. La'erev, then the night comes, a flood comes, washes away everything I did. And what does Shlomo Melech say? La'erev, al tanach yadecha. Literally, do not withdraw your hand. Keep planting. Keep building. Keep doing. Shlomo Melech says, Ki eincha yodea eze yichshar. Because in life, you never know what's going to work. Isn't that incredible? Shlomo Melech says, in life, you really never know. It's interesting, right? How when we start out, I think when we're young, we think about what we want to accomplish, right? Well, hopefully we think about what we want to accomplish. And we have dreams and aspirations. Because when I'm young, I think this is the most important thing. And something amazing happens as we get older, which is the things we thought that were important when we were young are actually not important when we get old, right? I often find that there's an amazing circle of life. Right? If you think about it for just a moment, right? Babies, right? What do babies want? Babies just want to know that they could be fed, there's someone to hold them, and there's someone who loves them. And elderly people, what do they want? To make sure that they're fed, someone to hold them, and someone to love them. So it's almost like when we're infants and really old, we got it right. It's just all the years in between that we become exceptionally complicated. And what Shlomo HaMelech is saying is that you have to plant in the morning when life is great, but you also have to plant in the evening when life is difficult. You can't stop planting because you never know what happens in life. You never know what takes root and what flourishes and what blossoms. And you never know which are the right dreams to dream. What are the right goals to have? What are the right aspirations to nurture? I don't know. So I have to plant in the morning and I can't withdraw my hand in the evening. It's easy to plant when the sun is coming up and life is great and I'm excited and filled with promise and potential. But what do you do in the evening? What do you do when life washes away your topsoil? What do you do when the earth overturns the very seeds that you planted? What do you do when your plans don't materialize? What do you do when life turns everything on its head, as happens so often? It happens to all of us. The only difference is for some of us, it's dramatic and traumatic, and for some of us, it's a little bit easier and nuanced. But all of us experience life turning us on our head. Shlomo Melech says, keep planting. Keep planting, because you never know. In life, you never know that you never know which plant is going to grow to maturity. Right? You never know in life which things are really going to be successful. So you just have to keep planting. You have to plant in the morning, you have to plant in the evening. And then Shlomo Melech says at the end, V'im shnehem ke'echad, And ultimately, again, if you're one of those lucky people who what you plant in the morning and what you plant in the evening both take root, tovim, how fortunate you are. So I just want to point out, this is the pasuk that Rabbi Akiva begins with. Remember the structure of the Gemara. So number 2, Rabbi Akiva first begins with a statement of Shlomo HaMelech. Even if you learn Torah in your youth, learn Torah in your old age. Even if you established students in your youth, establish students in your own age, old age. Why Rabbi Akiva says? Because at the end of the day, you have to plant in the morning, but even at night, when life becomes filled with adversity, you cannot stop planting. You cannot stop planting because you never know in life which plants take root and fully flourish. When nighttime comes, and it comes for everyone at different times, adversity, overwhelming circumstances, it is tempting to wave the white flag of surrender. But do not give in. Find a way to plant. Find a way to move forward. After Rabbi Akiva finishes the last levaya, the dust is still on his clothing. He dusts himself off, dries his tears, goes down to the south, finds 5 new Talmidim. Now I'll tell you something amazing. Remember, in that list of those five Talmidim, who is there? Rabbi Shimon. Who is Rabbi Shimon? It's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rashbi, the Tana Eloki. So you understand that the lives of these 2 men are very much intertwined. Very much intertwined. I don't think I put the Gemara on this sheet, but there is an incredible Gemara Meseches Pesachim, overwhelming Gemara, that Rabbi Akiva was one of the Asar Harugei Malchus. He was one of the 10 martyrs, and he was incarcerated for the high crime of teaching Torah in public. So the Gemara relates the story that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai comes to visit Rabbi Akiva in jail. And you have to imagine this scene. Remember, Rabbi Akiva is an old man already. This is the end of his life. He's murdered by the Romans. He's incarcerated for teaching Torah. Who is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? Rabbi Akiva's lost everything. He's lost everything in this world already. And now he has 5 new students, Baruch Hashem. One of those students, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai comes into prison and he says, Rabbi, teach me Torah. Teach me Torah. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, because if I teach you Torah in a Roman prison, you're going to get in trouble also. And I don't want to do that. It's enough. So, what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says? Rabbi, if you don't teach me Torah, I'm going to report you to the Romans. Now, a little bit of an empty threat. Rabbi Akiva is already incarcerated by the Romans, waiting for execution. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was so upset that his Rebbe wouldn't teach him Torah. So Rabbi Akiva turns to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and he says, listen, you think I don't want to teach you Torah? You think of course I want to teach you Torah. And he gives a mashal. He says, more than the child wants to nurse, the mother wants to express the milk. Right? Because if the mother doesn't express her milk, it's painful for her. So Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Akiva says, I'm the mother. You, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, are the child. I know you want to nurse. You want to suckle from my Torah. But more than you want to nurse, I want to give it over, but I can't. And Rashbi says, Rabbi, you're right, but you know what? If the mother doesn't nurse, she might be in pain, but the baby could die. And Rashbi says to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi, if you don't give us your Torah, what's going to happen to us? And the Gemara then relates that Rabbi Akiva went on to teach Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai 5 lessons. The Gemara recounts all of them, 5 lessons in a Roman prison, waiting for execution in the most barbaric fashion. Rebbe and Talmud, Rabbi Akiva and his newfound primary disciple, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, learn Torah together. This, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we know, is also very much linked to Lag BaOmer, right? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, different traditions. The whole story with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that he had to hide out in a cave from the Romans. Again, we'll save that for next year, Mirat Hashem. Others say that the Lag BaOmer is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's yard site. But that encounter between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Akiva in a Roman prison is so profound. Because that's it. That encounter, that's who we are. We never stop planting. And even though life has a way of washing away everything you planted, and life has ways sometimes of even robbing you of your dreams, and life has ways sometimes of turning everything on its head, we don't wave the white flag of surrender. We don't yield. We don't give in. So your 24,000 students die, go find 5 new ones. You're in a prison for teaching Torah, teach more Torah. Whatever you have to do to keep being productive, whatever you have to do to keep growing, whatever you have to do to become the best version of yourself, you do it. That was the legacy of Rabbi Akiva. And that's also the legacy, of course, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Again, I'm not going to get into Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in this year, because again, Rashbi is a whole different story, but it's the same dynamic. And now if we loop this back, we begin to see the power of Lag BaOmer. So remember again how we started 40 minutes ago? We started again with a statement in the Shulchan Aruch, right? And the Shulchan Aruch said that on Lag BaOmer there are 2 parts that happen. 2 parts. There's the cessation, or the lifting of the mourning restrictions. And that, of course, again, we understand that. Because comes Lag BaOmer, ultimately, again, Rabbi Akiva's students stop dying. So I understand that. The part that was a bit enigmatic to us was the phrase, Umar bin Bo Kitzas Simcha. What does that mean? What do you mean? We celebrate a little bit. First of all, either celebrate or don't celebrate. I mean, you celebrate a little bit. And remember the pre-Chadash's question, why would we celebrate? Because the students stopped dying. They stopped dying because there was no one left. Remember what the pre-Chadash answered? The pre-Chadash says, no, the celebration, the Kitzas Simcha, is because Rabbi Akiva went and found 5 new students. And now we understand what the pre-Chadash is really saying. Do you know what the celebration of Lag BaOmer is? The celebration of Lag BaOmer is the celebration of the resilience of the Jew. The celebration of Lag BaOmer is the resilience of the human spirit. The celebration of Lag BaOmer is the inner strength that each of us possess. Because I want to tell you something very important. If Rabbi Akiva has the strength, then you have the strength. Then I have the strength, because we are all cut from the same cloth. We all come from the same Ribono Shel Olam. Each of us has a neshama that, as the Baal HaTanya says, is a chelek Eloka mima'al mamish, is a spark of the Ribono Shel Olam. So Rabbi Akiva is no different than me. Rabbi Akiva is no different than you. The only difference between me and Rabbi Akiva is Rabbi Akiva makes good decisions, and most of the time I make poor decisions. That's just the difference between a regular person and Rabbi Akiva. But the strength is exactly the same. Mar bin bo kitzas simcha. You want to know what the simcha of Lag BaOmer is? The simcha of Lag BaOmer is the ability to overcome adversity. The simcha of Lag BaOmer is the ability that even when you see life crumbling down all around you, that you could dust yourself off, pick yourself back up, and dream new dreams. Now again, I want to point out, a lot of times after adversity, we like to think, pick yourself back up and it'll be just as good as it was before. Anyone who ever undergoes adversity knows that even if you find the strength to pick yourself back up, it's never the same as it was before. This is a very important idea, because, I often mention this. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau has this idea where he says, Jews are filled with optimism. That is our greatest koach. But you need to have grounded optimism. Right? If a person doesn't have grounded optimism, they become a little bit delusional. So we have the ability to pick ourselves up in the aftermath of trauma and tragedy. Is it become the same as it was before? No. Anyone who's ever undergone tragedy or trauma will tell you that even if you find the strength to pick yourself back up, it's never the same, but that's okay. Who says it's supposed to be the same? I want to point out, Rabbi Yek, what would have been if you were writing this story and you wanted to write a happily ever after story, right? What would have been a happily ever after story? And Rabbi Akiva went and he established 24,000 new Talmidim. What a story! And everyone lived happily ever after. It doesn't say that. Rabbi Akiva established 5 new Talmidim. Wow. We started the story with 24,000. We started the story with 24,000. And we end with 5. And we end with 5. So you're right. Sometimes in the aftermath of trauma and tragedy, sometimes when life washes away all of the seeds that you've planted, when you replant, it's not the same as it was before. But you still have to replant. you still have to rebuild. You still have to pick yourself back up. You still have to try again. You still have to push yourself to do more. It'll never be like it was. The truth is, as we get older, we recognize that with every mistake we make, or every misstep, or every setback, it's never the same as what it was. But that's okay. It's something new. Something new could become even better, or maybe it's just going to be different. But this is the ktsas simcha. This is the happiness. This is the little bit of joy of Lag BaOmer. The recognition that, you know what? I can rebuild. I can rebuild. And what a profound lesson. Because we all need to rebuild. You know, for some of us, rebuilding is from trauma. Person endures a loss. Person suffers a severe setback. They're ready to wave the white flag of surrender. Lag BaOmer reminds me, never surrender. And sometimes it's not as intense. Sometimes it's just, a lot of times in life, I wash away my own topsoil. Nothing happened. I made bad decisions. I made poor decisions. I went down the wrong path in life. I made wrong choices. I just made wrong choices. Nothing happened to me externally. There's no tragedy or external trauma. It's internal tragedy, internal trauma. Look what I've done to myself. And sometimes we make so many mistakes that we think that we have to surrender. Nothing good could come from me. Nothing beautiful or holy could come from this personality. And it's not true. It's not true. Even if you've washed away your own topsoil, even if you've ruined all of your own seeds, even if you've messed up your life and yourself, you could turn it around. You could turn it around. La'erev al tanach yadcha. Do not stop planting even in the nighttime. This is the ktsas simcha of Lag BaOmer. See, it's not full-blown simcha. It's not full-blown simcha. Why? Because at the end of the day, when Rabbi Akiva found these 5 new Talmidim in the south of Eretz Yisrael, it was incredible. But his heart was still broken over the 24,000 that were lost. So it's not full simcha. When life turns you on your head, right? When life washes away your seeds, when everything falls down, comes crumbling down or implodes, it's hard to be joyous, fully joyous, but I could be a shtickle joyous. A shtik simcha, a little bit of simcha. Why? Because I can rebuild. And that's why what's the symbol of Lag BaOmer, right? There are 2 symbols. There's the bow and arrow, which we'll have to say for next year. But the other primary symbol of Lag BaOmer, of course, is the bonfire. The bonfire. And that bonfire has many levels of symbolism. But on the most basic level, as related to Rabbi Akiva, what's the bonfire? The bonfire represents the ability to bring light even into the darkness. Because isn't that the entire message of Lag BaOmer? Our great teacher, our great Rebbe, Rabbi Akiva, taught us that no matter what life does to you, pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and plant something new. No matter how dark your world becomes, kindle your fire and do something. Does the bonfire illuminate the entire night? It does not. It's still dark all around, right? You can't really fully drive away the darkness, but you could create some light in the midst of that darkness. Sometimes you can't go ahead and replicate all of the seeds that you had originally planted, but you could try to plant some new ones and make something beautiful. This is the ktsas simcha, the little bit of simcha of Lag BaOmer. So let us hope that Emir Hashem, and I'm happy that we get to learn this today, so we have a little bit of time to internalize this before tomorrow night. And we have to go into Lag BaOmer with a renewed sense of purpose, because all of us have suffered setbacks. And so many of us, not even being consciously aware of it, have given up. We've given up. People think that giving up on life means like you get into bed, pull the covers over your head, and don't get out. That's certainly one form of giving up. But a lot of times we give up in much more nuanced fashion. How many of us have stopped dreaming? No more dreaming for me. Too much has happened. Too many broken dreams, shattered dreams. How many of us have stopped setting higher and lofty goals and expectations for ourselves because we're so down on ourselves and we're so down on life? right? We might smile. It's good. You always have to keep, right? Having mekabelas kol adam b'sefer panim yafos. You have to greet the world with a smile because everyone knows that when you ask someone how they're doing, people really only want to hear one answer, which is fine. Everything is great. No one really wants to hear your tsaros. So we put on a good face, we put on a good smile. But how many of us have an external smile that is masking so much inner pain? So much inner pain. Pain from failure, pain from loss, pain from tragedy, personal, internal, external. And we give up on ourselves. We just give up on ourselves. And comes Lag BaOmer, comes Rabbi Akiva, comes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they whisper in our ear, I'm so sorry that life has washed away all the seeds that you've planted. But find the courage to plant again. Find the courage to do something. Find the courage to lift yourself up, dust yourself off, and create something beautiful. Maybe it won't be as beautiful as it once was. But just because it can't be as beautiful as it once was, doesn't mean it can't be something magnificent. We should all be Zochem, Yirtzeh Hashem, to tap into and to experience the Kitzas Simcha of Lag BaOmer, and Yirtzeh Hashem, take that Simcha with us into the days, the weeks, the months, and years ahead. Wishing everyone a wonderful day, and Yirtzeh Hashem, next week we return back to Sefer Tehillim. Thank you again.
There were two questions about this year that came in on the chat that I thought maybe if you had a minute.
Sure.